The mechanic lived in a small metal room at the edge of the colony, a place where the walls rattled whenever cargo ships landed too close, and the floor never stayed warm for long. He had grown used to the sound of engines failing, cables snapping, and frustrated pilots yelling for help. It was the rhythm of his life. Every morning he woke up to the same thin blanket, the same broken heater, and the same heavy feeling that today would not be much different from yesterday. He was good at his work. People in the colony always said that. They came to him with half-dead machines, burned circuits, leaking fuel lines, and snapped stabilizers. He fixed them all, often working until his hands were scratched and covered in grease. He never complained, because complaining never solved anything. The colony paid him, but never enough to pull him out of the life he was stuck in. Most days he ate cheap rations alone, sitting on a crate because he could not afford a proper chair. Still, he kept going. He had grown up believing that hard work eventually pushed life forward, even if it was slow. Maybe one day he would have a real workshop. Maybe one day he would fix something bigger than a farming drone. Maybe one day he would be known for more than being the quiet mechanic at the edge of town. But dreams stayed dreams, and he did not expect anything to change anytime soon. One afternoon, while he was bent over a damaged engine core, he heard a loud alarm echo through the colony. It was a sound he had never heard before. The colony used different alarms for storms, fires, and incoming cargo, but this one was sharp and almost ceremonial. He wiped his hands on a cloth, stepped outside his workshop, and saw a group of officials rushing toward the landing bay. People whispered and stared. The mechanic followed the crowd's gaze and saw a large transport ship descending slowly like a quiet beast. The ship didn't look like anything from the colony. It carried markings he had only seen on news broadcasts. It belonged to the alien empire that ruled several nearby worlds. He watched from a distance, unsure if he should return to his work or wait. He knew the officials would never come to someone like him. They usually stayed near the central district, giving orders from comfortable offices. But as the ship landed, one of the officials scanned the crowd and then pointed directly at him. "You," the official said, "we need your workshop prepared immediately." The mechanic blinked. "My workshop? Why?" "No questions," the official replied in a strict tone. "An important guest requires immediate repairs." That was all he needed to hear. He rushed back to his workshop, quickly clearing tools off the main table, pushing scrap metal aside, and moving his old stool out of the way. The place was messy, but he knew where everything was. He reorganized it at a speed that surprised even him. By the time the officials escorted the visitor inside, the mechanic was already ready. He expected a soldier or a commander to step in, but instead, a tall figure dressed in a flowing coat entered with slow, calm steps. The visitor moved gracefully, almost too gracefully for the dusty metal floor. When the hood was lowered, the mechanic felt his chest tighten. It was the Empress of the alien empire. He had seen her in Hollis before. She always appeared strong, silent, and distant. But seeing her only a few feet away felt unreal. She carried an expression that made her seem tired yet powerful at the same time. Her attendants stayed close behind her, but she lifted her hand to signal them to stop. She looked around his small workshop, taking in the rusty shelves and the scattered machine parts. For a moment, she said nothing. The mechanic felt embarrassed, wishing he had cleaned better, wishing the place looked less poor. But the Empress did not seem bothered. "Your hands," she said softly, "show long years of work." He looked down, confused. "They're just hands, nothing special." "They are skilled," she replied. "And honesty is rare." Her voice was calm, but it carried a weight he could not understand. Before he could respond, one of her attendants stepped forward holding a small handheld device. "Your Majesty's transport developed a malfunction," the attendant explained. The mechanic must repair it quickly. The mechanic nodded and was led outside to the transport ship. The moment he saw the engine, he understood the problem. A cooling channel had been damaged, probably during the ship's descent. It wasn't a hard fix, but it required patience and careful alignment. He rolled up his sleeves and began working. The Empress, instead of staying inside where it was clean and warm, stepped closer and watched. He tried not to look at her, but he could feel her presence behind him as he worked. It made him nervous. Not because she was an alien ruler, but because she watched with quiet attention, almost as if she was studying him rather than the engine. After several minutes, she finally spoke again. "Why do you live out here?" she asked gently. "Far from the central district." He tightened a bolt. "Because rent is cheaper and noise doesn't bother me." "Noise from machines comforts you," she said, almost as a statement. "Machines make sense," he replied. "People don't." The Empress gave a small breath that might have been a faint laugh, though he was not sure. He kept working, finishing the final adjustments. When he was done, the engine hummed smoothly again. "It's fixed," he said, stepping back. The Empress ran her hand along the side of the engine, as if confirming his words through touch. Then she turned to her attendants. "Mark this workshop," she said. The attendants seemed startled. "Your Majesty, you mean—" "Yes," she answered. Before anyone could ask further, she stepped closer to the mechanic. Her eyes held a strange softness, something he never expected from a ruler known for strength and discipline. "You helped without hesitation," she told him. "You work with care, even when no one notices. I value that." He didn't know what to say. No one had ever spoken about his work like that. He simply nodded and murmured a quiet "thank you." She studied him for another moment, then gave a small nod of her own. Her attendants guided her away, and within minutes the ship lifted off again. The mechanic watched the sky until it disappeared, still unsure what had really happened. For the rest of the day, he tried to return to his routine. He fixed a broken water filter, tightened loose wiring in an old crawler vehicle, and repaired the wheel on a farming lot. But his mind stayed stuck on the strange encounter. Why had the Empress spoken to him like that? Why had she asked those questions? Why did she look at him as if she saw more than he understood when night fell? He sat on the crate outside his workshop and stared at the stars. The colony was quiet. Only distant engines echoed through the darkness. He felt something restless inside him, something he had not felt in years. Hope. Not because he expected a miracle, but because for the first time in a long time, someone had noticed him. Someone important. Someone who did not look at him as just a poor mechanic, but as a person who mattered. He didn't know that the Empress had already made a decision far bigger than he could imagine. He didn't know that she had left instructions with her officials. He didn't know that his small workshop, his quiet life, and his simple world were about to change soon. He only sat under the night sky, unaware that the next time officials arrived at his door, they would bring something he could never prepare for. Something alive. Something rare. Something that would turn his ordinary life into something extraordinary. The next morning, the mechanic woke to the familiar sound of his old heater sputtering to life. The sun had barely risen, and the colony was quiet except for the occasional hum of distant engines. He expected another normal day, fixing broken machines, listening to pilots complain, and hoping no major disaster would come his way. He had no idea that his life was already shifting in ways he couldn't yet imagine. The quiet was broken when a group of imperial officials arrived at his workshop, moving with a seriousness that made him drop the wrench he was holding. They didn't knock. They didn't call ahead. They simply stepped in, filling the small space with their presence. The mechanic wiped his hands nervously on a cloth that had seen better days. "You have been chosen," one of the officials said, his tone sharp but not unkind. The Empress has left instructions concerning you. You are required to follow them immediately. The mechanic blinked. Chosen? Instructions? I don't understand. The official gave a thin nod and placed a small sealed container on the workbench. This is for you. Open it only when told. Do not attempt to move it until the Empress's envoy arrives. The mechanic stared at the container. It was heavy, metal-clad, and strangely cold to the touch. He didn't even know what it might contain, but something about it made him uneasy. His mind raced with questions. Why him? Why had the Empress singled him out? He was just a mechanic, barely scraping by, living on the edge of the colony, where most people didn't even notice him. The officials didn't wait for an answer. They gave one last serious glance, and then left as abruptly as they had arrived. The mechanic sat alone, staring at the container. Every instinct in him screamed that something big was about to happen, but he couldn't even guess what. He tried to return to work, fixing a cracked fuel line on a nearby hovercart, but his hands kept shaking. He tightened bolts too hard, misaligned panels, and realized he was working only half-focused. Hours passed. By late afternoon, the sun had dipped low, casting long shadows across the dusty colony streets. The mechanic decided he could wait no longer. He lifted the container carefully, placing it on a cleared workbench. His fingers fumbled with the latch. The metal clicked open, and he hesitated, taking a slow breath. Inside, he found a small, fur-covered creature curled up, eyes half closed, glaring at him with what could only be described as pure annoyance. It was an albino leopard, small but clearly not ordinary. Its fur shone pale white even in the dim light, and its eyes had a strange glow, like faintly burning embers. The leopard stretched lazily, showing teeth that were sharper than they appeared in the container. The mechanic froze. He had never seen anything like it. It blinked slowly, watching him with a mix of curiosity and irritation, as if it knew he was unworthy of its attention. I'm supposed to take care of you? He asked quietly, almost to himself. The leopard's tail flicked once, sharply, and it let out a low, throaty growl. That seemed like an answer. Over the next few days, the mechanic tried to get the creature to respond to him. He offered food, water, and even tried speaking softly, but the albino leopard ignored him most of the time. It prowled around the small workshop, knocking over a few crates and scratching at the walls. The mechanic cleaned up after it, realizing that trying to force it into submission would only make things worse. The leopard was not like the animals he had grown up around. It had a presence, a strength, and a mind that seemed far beyond a normal creature. Neighbors came by, curious about the strange new companion. They whispered about how rare albino creatures were, especially ones from the alien empire. Some offered to buy it, but the mechanic shook his head. He didn't understand why he had been entrusted with it, but he already felt a strange connection forming. Despite its grumpy attitude, the creature seemed to sense his vulnerability. One night, a storm hit the colony. Strong winds rattled the metal walls, and rain fell in heavy sheets. The mechanic struggled to keep the workshop dry and the small machines safe. The albino leopard sat near the corner, its eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. When a section of the roof started leaking, water pooling dangerously near some old circuits, the leopard moved with surprising speed. It leapt over a crate, pushed a panel into place with its strong paws, and crouched, watching as if to say, "I've got this." The mechanic's jaw dropped. You did that?" he whispered. The leopard blinked slowly, not even acknowledging him. He realized then that the creature was not only intelligent, but capable of understanding situations without being told. Its mind worked in ways that human logic could not always predict. Over the next few days, small signs began to appear. When the colony lost power unexpectedly, the leopard padded silently to the generator room, curling near the machinery. Lights flickered as energy seemed to pulse from it, stabilizing circuits long enough for the generator to come back online. The mechanic was amazed. Every time he thought he understood the creature, it did something new, something beyond explanation. He began keeping a journal, writing down every strange behavior, every moment that hinted at intelligence beyond what he knew from any animal. Despite its grumpiness, the leopard slowly grew accustomed to his presence. It stopped hissing when he approached, though it still refused to sit quietly. It would follow him around, sometimes jumping onto workbenches, sometimes sleeping near the heater. And though it never purred, never nuzzled him, there was an unspoken bond forming. The mechanic realized that caring for this creature was no longer about feeding or cleaning. It was about understanding, patience, and learning to communicate without words. One afternoon, while repairing a hover drone, he noticed the leopard staring at him intently. Its ears twitched, its eyes narrowed. Then it moved closer, brushing against his leg ever so lightly. The mechanic froze. It was a small gesture, almost imperceptible, but it felt like trust. He looked down at the creature, unsure what to say, and smiled. "I think we'll manage," he said softly. The leopard blinked, as if in agreement, then walked away, tail high, still aloof but no longer openly hostile. Time passed slowly, and the colony began to accept the strange new pair. Children watched from a distance, daring each other to get closer. Traders whispered about the mechanic and the albino leopard, wondering why someone of such modest means had been chosen to inherit such a rare and powerful creature. The mechanic said little, not fully understanding it himself. All he knew was that his life, once predictable and lonely, was becoming something different. Something bigger. The turning point came when the colony faced a sudden emergency. A fire broke out in a storage area filled with fuel containers. People panicked, running in all directions. The mechanic grabbed a small extinguisher, but the flames were spreading too fast. Before he could think further, the albino leopard sprang into action. It bounded into the burning area with no hesitation, knocking containers out of the way and guiding trapped colonists toward safety. Smoke curled around its fur, but it moved calmly, with purpose. The mechanic followed, heart pounding, amazed at its courage and intelligence. When the fire was finally under control, he looked at the creature, coughing from the smoke, and felt a surge of gratitude and awe. It was no ordinary leopard. It had purpose, strength, and a mind that seemed to anticipate danger before it came. That night, as the colony settled back into quiet, he realized that the Empress's choice had been deliberate. She had not entrusted him with just a pet. She had given him a companion, a protector, and perhaps even a teacher. He sat by the heater, the leopard curled nearby, eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. The storm from days ago had passed, leaving the colony calm but alert. For the first time, the mechanic felt something he had not felt in years. Not hope, not fear, but a sense of destiny. Something was coming, something larger than either of them could imagine. And though he did not yet understand the full scale of it, he knew one thing with certainty. His life had changed forever. The albino leopard shifted, watching him quietly, as if confirming what he had begun to sense. This was only the beginning. Days passed, and the mechanic began to settle into a strange new rhythm with the albino leopard. The creature no longer growled at him constantly, though it remained grumpy and proud. It followed him from room to room, observing his every move with sharp, intelligent eyes, yet it never fully relaxed. The mechanic still did not understand why the Empress had left this creature in his care, and he worried constantly about keeping it safe. One morning, while sipping bitter synthetic coffee and watching the pale light filter through the workshop windows, he heard the sound of hovering engines again. The hairs on his arms stood up. Imperial envoys had arrived. He hurried to the door, unsure what they wanted this time. He opened it to see 3 tall figures standing with straight backs, faces serious. They did not smile, did not make small talk. "You are to come with us," one of them said. His voice was calm, but it carried authority. "The Empress has passed away. You have inherited her most treasured companion." The mechanic froze. His stomach tightened. He had expected paperwork, instructions, maybe even a small reward, but he had never imagined this. I inherited," he stammered. "I don't understand." The envoys handed him a scroll sealed with the Empress's insignia. "All legal matters have been arranged. You are now the official caretaker of the creature." They paused. One of them glanced at the albino leopard, which was lying on the floor, but staring at the newcomers with unblinking eyes. "It is dangerous to underestimate it. Treat it with respect. It is more than a simple animal." The mechanic swallowed hard. I will. I promise." They left without another word, leaving him alone with the creature and the strange weight of responsibility pressing down on him. For the first time, he felt that he was part of something bigger than the colony, bigger than his tiny workshop, bigger than the long days of fixing broken machines. He had inherited a secret, something powerful, something alive. The albino leopard watched him closely as he unpacked a few basic supplies: food, water, and a small makeshift bed. It sniffed everything cautiously, but ignored the food. It padded around the workshop, rushing against walls, jumping onto shelves, and testing its surroundings. The mechanic realized that this was no ordinary creature. It had intelligence, a mind capable of thinking, planning, and evaluating situations far beyond any animal he had ever known. But as days turned into weeks, small, unusual events continued. Sometimes the leopard seemed to understand his words before he finished speaking. When he asked for a wrench, it would tap the tool he needed with its paw. When he warned of a loose panel or a dangerous wire, it would move to block or stabilize the object. One evening, during a sudden power outage in the colony, the creature approached the main generator and emitted a faint glow. Sparks flickered, circuits hummed, and within moments, power returned to the colony. The mechanic's jaw dropped. You saved the generator," he whispered. The albino leopard blinked slowly, as if acknowledging the praise, but saying nothing. The mechanic realized he was no longer just a caretaker. He was responsible for understanding the creature, for learning how it worked, and for keeping it safe from those who might misunderstand its power. Word spread quickly in the colony about the rare albino leopard and its unusual abilities. Traders, travelers, and even a few officials came by to see it. Some were curious, some suspicious, some openly fearful. The mechanic spoke little. He did not fully understand the creature himself, and he knew that anyone trying to exploit it could create disaster. Still, he began to notice that the leopard seemed to enjoy the attention in its own way. It would stand tall, glare at the onlookers, and make its presence felt, reminding everyone that it was not a toy or a simple pet. Despite its pride and grumpiness, the creature began to bond with him. It no longer hissed when he approached, and sometimes it even allowed him to touch its fur without protest. The mechanic felt a strange warmth growing in his chest. He had spent so many years alone, unnoticed, struggling just to survive, and now he shared a connection with something rare, intelligent, and fiercely loyal. It was a feeling he had never known, a sense of belonging and purpose that went beyond fixing engines or running errands. One evening, as the colony prepared for a routine supply drop, the mechanic was repairing a damaged hover drone near the landing pad. The albino leopard lay nearby, watching with narrowed eyes. Suddenly, a group of off-world scavengers arrived, seeking to take advantage of the colony's isolated location. They landed small craft near the edge of the settlement and armed figures began moving through the streets. The mechanic froze. He had no weapons, no defense. Panic rose in his chest. The leopard stood and padded toward him, ears forward, eyes glowing faintly. It was tense, alert, and ready. The mechanic's fear mixed with awe. He realized that the creature would not allow harm to come to him. Even now, when he had done nothing to deserve such protection, it had chosen him as its companion. The scavengers approached the workshop, weapons raised. The mechanic tried to hide behind the workbench, heart hammering. Then he heard a low growl, deep and resonant, that seemed to vibrate through the floor. The albino leopard stepped forward, its fur shimmering faintly under the fading light. The scavengers froze, unsure what they were seeing. In a sudden burst, the creature leaped into the center of the landing pad. Its form shimmered and elongated, bones and muscles shifting in ways that defied logic. The mechanic's eyes widened as he saw the leopard transform before him. It became taller, stronger, and more humanoid in posture, yet retained its feline grace. Its eyes glowed like embers, its claws elongated, and its presence radiated authority and power. The scavengers faltered, terrified. The mechanic stood frozen, watching in disbelief. He realized the truth. The Empress had not left him a simple pet. She had entrusted him with a protector capable of choosing its own master. The creature was powerful, intelligent, and fiercely loyal to him alone. The transformed guardian moved with precision, pushing the scavengers back without causing fatal harm. Its movements were elegant, controlled, and terrifyingly effective. Within moments, the threat was neutralized. The scavengers fled, leaving the colony unharmed. The mechanic could hardly speak. He stepped forward, placing a hand on the guardian's arm. You saved everyone," he said quietly. The creature's eyes softened for a moment, the glow dimming slightly. It returned to its albino leopard form, lying down beside him, still grumpy, but calmer than before. The mechanic realized that this was only the beginning. There would be more challenges, more people who underestimated him and his companion. But for the first time, he knew that he could face them. He was no longer alone, and his life would never be ordinary again. The colony slowly returned to its usual pace, though whispers of the albino leopard and its unusual abilities lingered. Children stared from a distance. Adults speculated about its origins, and even officials seemed cautious when approaching the mechanic's workshop. Yet he felt a sense of pride he had never known. He was no longer just a poor mechanic struggling to survive. He was a protector, a caretaker, and the chosen companion of a creature beyond imagination. At night, he sat beside the leopard, tracing patterns on the floor with a stick, and spoke softly about the day. The creature listened, head tilting slightly, ears flicking. Though it said nothing, the mechanic felt understood. He knew that a bond had formed, one built on trust, respect, and mutual reliance. He also knew that the Empress had seen something in him long before he had seen it in himself. He had inherited more than a creature. He had inherited responsibility, adventure, and a connection that spanned worlds. And though he did not yet know what the future held, he felt ready to face it, with the albino leopard by his side. The days ahead promised danger, challenges, and discoveries, but for the first time, he welcomed them. Life was no longer ordinary, and that was exactly how it should be. The albino leopard shifted beside him, eyes glowing faintly in the dim light of the workshop. It purred silently, or at least made a sound like it soft and almost unrecognizable. The mechanic smiled, feeling a sense of wonder and hope he had never known. Together, they were more than a mechanic and a creature. They were a team, and whatever lay ahead, they would face it side by side. Life in the colony had changed in ways the mechanic could hardly describe. Every day was a mix of ordinary chores and extraordinary surprises. The albino leopard, still grumpy and proud, had become his constant companion. It would watch him as he worked, sometimes leaning on a crate, sometimes pacing slowly around the workshop, and sometimes resting nearby, eyes half closed but alert. The mechanic still did not understand the full extent of its abilities, but he had learned to respect them, and more importantly, to trust the creature. One morning, a sudden alarm echoed through the colony. The mechanic had grown used to minor alarms from faulty machinery, but this one was different. It was sharp, urgent, and almost alive in its sound. He dropped his wrench and glanced at the albino leopard. Its ears twitched and its body stiffened. It knew before he did that something was wrong. He ran outside, following the sound to a nearby power station. Smoke and sparks were coming from the main generator, threatening to shut down the entire colony. The workers were panicking, trying to contain the situation, but the generator was beyond their knowledge. The mechanic knew he had to act quickly. He reached for tools, but the smoke burned his eyes, and the heat was already overwhelming. The albino leopard padded calmly toward the generator, ignoring the chaos around them. Its eyes glowed faintly, and as it approached the machinery, the sparks seemed to respond. Small arcs of electricity danced around the creature's paws, not harming it, but connecting with the broken circuits. The mechanic watched, heart pounding, as the generator whirred to life again. Lights flickered and then stabilized. Machines began humming, and the colony slowly regained its order. He couldn't believe it. You fixed it," he whispered. The creature blinked slowly, its tail flicking once, as if saying, "Of course." The mechanic realized he was witnessing something beyond his understanding. The leopard was more than intelligent. It was capable of interacting with technology in ways humans could not explain. Over the next few days, the mechanic began observing the leopard more closely. He noticed patterns in its behavior. It reacted to danger before it happened. It seemed to understand the colony's machinery instinctively, and it could sense moods and intentions in people. Once, when a trader tried to sneak into the workshop, the leopard appeared behind him silently, growling low enough to make the man freeze. The trader left immediately, and the mechanic realized that the creature not only protected him physically, but also acted as a guardian for the entire colony. The relationship between the mechanic and the albino leopard grew stronger. Though it remained grumpy and independent, it allowed small gestures of trust. It would follow him silently when he ran errands, sit near him when he repaired machines, and occasionally brush against him, a subtle acknowledgement that it accepted him. The mechanic, in turn, spoke to it constantly. He shared his thoughts, his worries, and even his hopes. Though the creature never spoke, its reactions made him feel understood. One evening, as he worked late in the workshop, a distant rumble shook the colony. The mechanic looked up, confused, and noticed a bright glow on the horizon. Smoke and sparks were rising from the far edge of the settlement. He grabbed a portable scanner and ran toward the source, with the albino leopard close behind him. When they arrived, they found a collapsed structure, a supply depot that had caught fire from an unknown cause. Colonists were trapped inside, and the fire spread rapidly. Panic set in. The mechanic wanted to help, but the flames were too strong, too unpredictable. He froze, unsure what to do next. The albino leopard stepped forward, moving calmly through the smoke and fire. Its body emitted a faint light, illuminating the path. It nudged debris aside, guided panicked colonists toward safety, and kept the flames from spreading too far. The mechanic followed closely, amazed at its courage and precision. He realized again that this creature was no ordinary animal. It was a protector, capable of making decisions in moments of crisis that could save lives. After the fire was controlled, the mechanic and the leopard returned to the workshop, exhausted. The colony whispered about what had happened. People speculated about the leopard's origins, its abilities, and why it had chosen the mechanic as its companion. Some were afraid, some were curious, and some were deeply grateful. The mechanic did not fully understand it himself, but he knew one thing. The creature had saved lives that day, including his own. The albino leopard rested nearby, its eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. The mechanic approached and knelt beside it. "You're amazing," he said quietly. "I don't know how you do all of this, but I'm glad you're here." The creature blinked slowly, almost as if acknowledging the compliment, then curled up closer. The mechanic felt a strange warmth in his chest, a sense of companionship he had never known before. Over the following weeks, the colony slowly adjusted to the presence of the albino leopard. Children watched from a safe distance, fascinated by its movements and its unusual fur. Traders and officials remained cautious, but they began to see the value of the creature as a protector. The mechanic continued his work, repairing machines and maintaining the colony's infrastructure. But now he did it with the knowledge that he had a powerful ally by his side. Despite its grumpiness, the albino leopard began to show subtle signs of affection. It would sit near him while he worked, occasionally brushing against his leg or allowing him to scratch behind its ears. It never purred or vocalized happiness in the way a normal animal might, but the mechanic felt the bond growing stronger every day. He realized that trust and respect were the foundation of their relationship, and that understanding each other required patience, observation, and care. One night, the mechanic could not sleep. He sat by the small window of his workshop, looking out at the stars. The colony was quiet, the night filled with soft hums from distant engines. The albino leopard lay nearby, eyes half closed but alert. The mechanic thought about everything that had happened since the Empress had left the creature in his care. He thought about the fires, the emergencies, and the countless times the leopard had saved him, or the colony. He realized that his life had changed in ways he could never have imagined. He was no longer just a poor mechanic, living a quiet and unnoticed life. He was a caretaker, a companion, and part of a team that was stronger than any one person alone. The albino leopard had chosen him, and in doing so, had given him purpose, courage, and a connection he had never known got. As he sat there, he felt a shift in the air. The leopard's ears twitched, its eyes glowed faintly, and it moved closer to him. The mechanic reached out and placed a hand on its fur. The warmth of the creature, its steady breathing, and the subtle energy it radiated filled him with a sense of calm and determination. He understood then that the Empress had seen something in him long before he had seen it in himself. She had trusted him with a creature of immense power, a being capable of great strength and intelligence, because she believed he could rise to the responsibility. And now, faced with challenges, dangers, and the unknown future, he realized he was ready. The albino leopard shifted its position, curling up closer to the mechanic. Its eyes remained open, glowing softly in the dim light, a silent promise of protection and loyalty. The mechanic smiled, feeling a deep sense of wonder and gratitude. Life was no longer ordinary, and he knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, he would face them with courage, guided by the bond he shared with the extraordinary creature at his side. The colony slept quietly that night, unaware of the extraordinary events that had shaped its protector and its caretaker. The mechanic and the albino leopard remained in the workshop, two unlikely companions bound together by trust, respect, and the silent understanding that they were stronger together. And though he did not yet know the full extent of the creature's powers or the true purpose of their connection, he felt ready to face whatever the future might bring, knowing that he would never face it alone. The colony had grown used to the quiet presence of the albino leopard, but nothing could prepare the mechanic for what happened one afternoon. The sun hung low in the sky, painting the metal buildings and dusty streets in shades of gold and orange. He was repairing a hover cart near the edge of the settlement when he noticed unusual activity on the horizon. Small ships, moving fast and low, approached the colony. He squinted, heart beating faster. He recognized the silhouettes immediately off-world mercenaries. They were notorious for raids and plundering isolated settlements. Panic gripped his chest. He ran back toward the workshop, trying to alert anyone nearby. The albino leopard was already moving. Its body tensed, ears forward, eyes glowing faintly. The mechanic's stomach churned. "Stay calm," he whispered, though he wasn't sure if he believed his own words. He ran into the workshop, grabbing whatever tools and makeshift weapons he could find, though he knew they would not be enough. The mercenaries were armed and experienced, while he had only his hands, his wits, and the strange creature at his side. The first ships landed, kicking up dust and debris. Figures emerged, weapons in hand, moving quickly through the streets. Colonists scattered, some trying to hide, others frozen in fear. The mechanic's heart pounded. He realized immediately that he could not protect them alone. The albino leopard stepped forward, eyes locked on the intruders. It let out a low, guttural growl, one that seemed to vibrate through the ground and the mechanic's bones. The mercenaries stopped, uncertain, their confidence shaken by the creature's presence. The mechanic had seen the leopard's strength before, but this time something felt different. There was a power in the way it stood, a calm intensity that made even the most seasoned mercenaries hesitate. Suddenly, the leopard's body began to shimmer, faint light wrapping around its form. The mechanic froze, unable to look away. Muscles elongated, bones shifted, and its posture changed. The creature grew taller, taller than any human or alien he had ever seen. Its humanoid stance combined with feline grace, and it radiated strength and authority. Its claws extended slightly, sharp and gleaming in the sunlight, and its eyes glowed brighter, like embers ready to ignite. The mercenaries exchanged nervous glances, their confidence faltering. One of them fired a weapon, but the bullets seemed to slow, bending slightly as they neared the transformed leopard. With a swift, fluid movement, the creature advanced, each step measured, powerful, and precise. The mechanic's heart raced. He had never imagined seeing this transformation, and he realized the truth. The Empress had entrusted him with something far beyond his understanding. The battle began. The albino leopard moved with skill and speed, disarming attackers without causing fatal harm. It struck with precision, knocking weapons aside, lifting enemies briefly into the air, and hurling them back safely but firmly. The mechanic watched, awestruck, as the creature protected the colony and him at the same time. Each motion was calculated, graceful, and terrifyingly effective. He wanted to help but realized that his presence could be dangerous in the chaos. Instead, he guided fleeing colonists to safety, helping them find cover while keeping his eyes on the battle. Sparks flew, dust rose, and the sounds of impact echoed through the settlement. Yet the leopard never faltered. Its focus never wavered. Every move it made seemed to protect him, and him alone, in a way that made the mechanic understand the depth of their bond. Minutes felt like hours, but eventually the mercenaries began retreating. They had underestimated the creature and the colony's resolve. The leopard, still in its humanoid form, stood in the center of the landing pad, chest heaving slightly, eyes scanning the horizon to ensure no one else approached. Its transformation slowly faded, and the creature returned to its albino leopard form. Sleek, white fur gleaming, eyes still sharp and alert. The mechanic ran toward it, heart pounding. You saved everyone," he whispered, kneeling beside it. The creature blinked slowly, a subtle acknowledgement that said more than words ever could. He reached out, touching its fur gently, feeling the warmth and strength beneath. "I don't know what I would have done without you," he admitted quietly. The colony slowly returned to normal, But the whispers about the albino leopard grew louder. Children stared from a distance. Adults speculated about its abilities, and officials from neighboring settlements cautiously approached to understand what had happened. The mechanic realized that the creature was no longer just his companion. It was a symbol of strength, hope, and protection. In the days that followed, the mechanic began to learn more about the leopard. He observed how it reacted to machinery, how it anticipated danger, and how it seemed to sense emotions. Once, during a minor accident in the workshop, a loose panel threatened to fall on him. The leopard was there instantly, nudging it aside with its paw, eyes glowing faintly. The mechanic realized that it understood him, perhaps even better than he understood himself. At night, they would sit in the workshop together. The mechanic would talk quietly about his day, his worries, and sometimes his dreams. The leopard would listen, eyes half closed but alert, occasionally brushing against him. The mechanic felt a bond that went beyond words. He realized that the Empress had not only entrusted him with a creature of immense power, but also with a partner who would challenge him, guide him, and protect him in ways he could not have imagined. He thought about the future, knowing that dangers would come again. The mercenaries were only the beginning. Other threats, more organized and more dangerous, would surely appear. But for the first time, he felt ready. He had the albino leopard, a being of intelligence, power, and loyalty, at his side. Together, they were stronger than any threat the galaxy could throw at them. The colony, too, began to change. People started to respect the mechanic in ways they never had before. They looked at him not just as a skilled worker, but as someone who had the courage, wisdom, and heart to handle a creature that no one else could. The albino leopard had transformed his life, not just by its power, but by showing the mechanic what it meant to trust, to protect, and to rise to responsibility. One evening, after a long day of repairs and observing the leopard, the mechanic sat outside, looking at the stars. The colony was quiet, peaceful, and alive in a way that made him feel both small and important at the same time. The leopard rested nearby, tail flicking slowly, eyes glowing faintly. He realized that their lives were intertwined, and that the Empress's choice had been deliberate. She had seen something in him, something he had never seen in himself, and she had entrusted him with a responsibility he was only beginning to understand. He reached out, placing a hand on the leopard's head. It leaned into him slightly, a rare gesture of trust and acceptance. "I promise," he said softly, "I will protect you. I will keep this colony safe, and I will honor the gift you've given me." The creature blinked slowly, almost as if agreeing, and curled up closer. For the first time, the mechanic felt complete. He had found purpose, companionship, and courage. He knew challenges would come, but he also knew he would never face them alone. The albino leopard had transformed more than just its form. It had transformed his life, his perspective, and his place in the colony. The night deepened, the stars shining brightly above, and the mechanic felt a quiet certainty. He and the albino leopard would face the future together, ready for whatever dangers, discoveries, or adventures lay ahead. Life would never be ordinary again, and for the first time, that thought filled him with excitement rather than fear. The days after the attack passed slowly, but the colony began to feel safer. The mercenaries had gone, and life returned to its usual rhythm, but everyone knew that things had changed. Whispers about the albino leopard spread throughout the settlement. People no longer saw it as just a creature. They saw it as a protector, something rare, something extraordinary. The mechanic noticed the change in how people looked at him, too. Some gave him respectful nods, others gave cautious smiles. Even the colony leaders approached him differently, understanding that he and the leopard together were a force no one could ignore. The mechanic spent most of his days repairing machines, tending to the colony, and observing the leopard. Despite all its power, the creature still had its grumpy moments. It would swipe at objects that moved too close, glare at colonists who got too curious, and sometimes disappear for hours, only to return as if nothing had happened. The mechanic realized that he had inherited more than just a protector. He had inherited a being with its own personality, its own rules, and its own sense of independence. One afternoon, a group of imperial officials arrived unexpectedly. They came quietly, without warning, and moved directly to the mechanic's workshop. He had learned to recognize the way they carried themselves, strict, formal, but respectful. The leader of the group held a sealed envelope with the Empress's insignia. He handed it to the mechanic without a word. The mechanic opened it slowly, and his eyes widened as he read the contents. The Empress had left a final message, not just for him, but for the albino leopard as well. She wrote that the creature had chosen him as its companion, that it would obey no one else, and that he had the authority and responsibility to care for it, protect it, and grow alongside it. The message confirmed everything the mechanic had begun to feel. The bond between him and the creature was real, sacred, and recognized by the highest authority of the empire. The mechanic read the letter aloud to the leopard, unsure if it could understand words, but knowing it would feel the tone and the intent. The albino leopard blinked, ears flicking, and curled closer to him. The mechanic felt a surge of pride and gratitude. The Empress had trusted him when he had thought himself unworthy, and now that trust was official. He realized that his life had been transformed completely. That evening, he walked through the colony with the leopard at his side. Children ran to peek from behind corners. Adults whispered, and traders stopped their work to glance. People no longer feared the creature. They respected it, and they respected him too. He felt a new kind of confidence, one that came not from wealth, status, or power, but from responsibility and trust earned over time. The albino leopard stayed close as he guided new projects in the colony. Together, they repaired old harvesters, fixed broken energy panels, and even reinforced the colony's defenses in case another attack came. The mechanic learned to anticipate the creature's reactions, and in turn, it seemed to understand his intentions without explanation. They worked as a team, a partnership built on trust and experience. One night, during a particularly quiet moment, the mechanic found himself sitting outside the workshop, looking at the stars. The albino leopard lay nearby, tail flicking gently, eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. He thought about everything that had happened since the Empress had left it in his care. The fires, the mercenary attack, the countless small moments that had built their bond. He realized that he had changed. He was no longer just a poor mechanic struggling to survive. He was a protector, a guide, and a trusted companion to a creature of immense power. He felt a deep sense of purpose that he had never experienced before. He understood that the Empress had seen something in him long before he had seen it in himself, and her trust had given him the courage to rise to the challenges life had thrown at him. The albino leopard stirred slightly, moving closer. It rested its head on his knee, a rare and intimate gesture. The mechanic reached down, stroking its fur gently. "We've come a long way," he whispered, "and we've only just begun." The creature blinked slowly, and the mechanic felt a sense of understanding pass between them. They did not need words. The bond they shared was stronger than any language. In the following weeks, the colony continued to thrive under their care. The mechanic's reputation grew, and people from nearby settlements began seeking his expertise. The albino leopard remained a constant presence, alert and protective, yet increasingly calm and cooperative. Together, they faced challenges, repaired what was broken, and defended the colony whenever danger threatened. Life was still hard, but it was also meaningful, full of purpose, and filled with a sense of connection that the mechanic had never known before. One morning, A young colonist approached him with a small problem, a broken energy panel on a distant building. The mechanic smiled, grabbed his tools, and the albino leopard followed silently. The child watched in awe as they worked together, the mechanic's hands skilled and precise, the leopard's presence steady and reassuring. It was a moment of everyday heroism, a moment that showed the strength of their bond and the impact they had on the lives of others. The day passed quietly, but the mechanic knew more challenges would come. Other threats, more dangerous and organized, would test him and the creature again. But he no longer feared the unknown. He had learned to trust the albino leopard, to trust himself, and to trust the life that had been given to him. They were ready, together, for anything. That night, the mechanic sat once more beneath the stars. The colony was peaceful, quiet, except for the distant hum of engines. The albino leopard lay beside him, tail flicking slowly, eyes half closed but alert. He thought about the Empress, about her wisdom and her foresight, and about the trust she had placed in him. He realized that life had transformed in ways he could never have imagined. From a poor, struggling mechanic to the chosen companion of a rare and powerful creature, he had gained purpose, respect, and a connection deeper than he had ever known. He felt gratitude, pride, and an unshakable sense of hope. The albino leopard shifted slightly, resting its head on his shoulder. The mechanic smiled softly, feeling the warmth and weight of its presence. "We're ready," he whispered, "for whatever comes next." The creature blinked slowly, a quiet acknowledgement that they would face the future together. Side by side, the colony slept peacefully that night, and for the first time, the mechanic felt a sense of complete calm. He had faced danger, learned responsibility, and earned trust. He was no longer just surviving. He was living with purpose, courage, and companionship. And as he sat there, staring at the stars with the albino leopard beside him, he understood something profound. Life was not just about existing, working, or getting by. Life was about trust, connection, courage, and rising to the challenges fate had given you. And in that moment, he knew he had been chosen not just to care for a creature of immense power, but to grow, to protect, and to become more than he had ever imagined. The albino leopard lifted its head, eyes glowing faintly, and gave a low, steady growl, not of anger, but of confidence and loyalty. The mechanic stroked its fur one last time before standing, feeling stronger, braver, and more ready than ever. Together, they walked back toward the workshop, ready to face whatever adventures awaited them in the colony, in the galaxy, and in the future that lay ahead. Their lives had been transformed, and nothing would ever be the same again.